Even as Stability AI releases model after model, financial pressures seem to be creating controversy around the company. Welcome back to the AI Breakdown Brief, all the AI headline news you need in around 5 minutes. Stability AI is clearly one of the most prolific companies in the AI space. Every week it seems like they release some new model that has people excited and creating new things and generally thinking in new ways about the frontiers of AI's capacity to help people create. And yet, even with all that, it appears that the company is under some fairly significant financial pressure. Bloomberg today published a piece called Stability AI has explored sale as investor urges CEO to resign. Now, a couple interesting things from this piece. First of all, apparently in a letter to management last month, one of Stability's largest investors, Coatue Management, called for CEO Ahmad Mostak to step down. Notably, this demand came just a year after Coatue helped lead a funding round that made Stability a unicorn. Coatue's argument in that letter was that, as Bloomberg put it, Mostak's leadership had prompted several senior managers to leave and place the startup in a tenuous financial position. Now, of course, one thing that we did talk about either last week or the week before that was how someone who had been working on audio projects inside Stability left and did a little mini press tour about how much he disagreed with the company's approach and thinking around copyright. However, beyond just this letter and questions of leadership, there's also some serious dollar and cents type concerns. According to Bloomberg sources, as of October, Stability was burning around $8 million a month compared to revenue that was in the low single-digit millions. In a post on X, Mostak wrote that Stability had made $1.2 million in revenue in August and was on track to make $3 million this month. Obviously, that's a far cry from the $8 million burn. It's also a significant enough gap that even deep coffers could go away fairly quickly. Stability raised $101 million last year and another $50 million in October, that latest time from Intel, but if you're losing between $5 and $7 million a month, even those big eye-popping numbers can go away pretty fast. Apparently surrounding that, Bloomberg has reported that Stability has, quote, presented itself as an acquisition target in recent weeks and held early-stage conversations with multiple companies. Bloomberg sources said that a deal is not imminent and that the company could decide not to sell. Bloomberg identifies some of the interested parties as Cohere and Jasper, who themselves have been subject to some amount of FUD as they've had to do multiple rounds of layoffs this year. Now, there are two possible, very different dimensions of this story. One is, of course, questions around specific leadership decisions, and that I think is a little bit less interesting for our purposes. One, because we don't have that information, and two, because if that is really what's going on, well, then it's just about personalities and leadership and intercompany struggles, all of which are fairly normal but not necessarily extrapolatable to some larger trend or insight. However, to the extent that there really is a sale process emanating from the gap between the cost of running this company and the amount of money it can make, well, then in some ways it might be reflective of one of the real serious difficulties of competing in the AI space right now, which is the incredible cost to do so. Compute is scarce and expensive, talent is scarce and expensive, and all of that adds up to a recipe in which very few players can actively compete. It's not an accident or a coincidence that we've seen a very new type of relationship form between the big tech companies that have the biggest coffers, i.e. the Googles and Microsofts and Amazons of the world, and the startup AI labs working on frontier models, who, even with basically blank checks from VCs, still need even more capital than is realistically available on Sand Hill Road. This is why some are worried about how AI could increase centralization around big tech. The director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Rohit Chopra, said in an event on Tuesday that he's, quote, concerned that a handful of firms and individuals could wield enormous control over decisions made throughout the world because of advances in AI. Now, that was part of a larger conversation around the difficulty in regulating AI, but it points, of course, to a reality. Now, of course, to some extent, we're just going to have to wait and see how this all plays out, but it certainly does seem like Stability AI is making some moves to shore up their financial situation. The day before this story broke, Ahmad tweeted out, Stability AI memberships. Recent weeks have shown how alignment of business models is important in AI. We are bringing in Stability memberships to help solve this alignment. We are doing okay as a business and ramping nicely. However, we want to move to a more aligned model, focusing on our core talent of building great models as the releases over the last year and next period shows. Basically, they're trying to figure out a business model where more people who are interacting with their AI models actually pay them to do so. Now, I will be clear that I hope that they are able to figure it out. Like I said, I have no insights into the inner workings of the company, but what I do know is that they are continually pumping out interesting new tools and features. Last week, we got Stable Video Diffusion. This week, we got SDXL Turbo, which is a nearly real-time text-to-image generation model that people are lauding as just incredibly fast in practice. Indeed, it is so fast that it starts generating imagery while you're typing the prompt. And while it's totally possible that inside a different home, they could still produce just as excellent of work, I'm always biased towards seeing startups stay independent for as long as possible. Now, speaking of startups, a few more interesting little bits of AI startup news. HeyGen, which is a video avatar creator that I have used in the past. You might have caught a video avatar episode after Elon announced Grok when I was on an anniversary trip down in Mexico. Well, that company has just added $5.6 million in new funding and reported that their revenue has gone from $1 million in annual recurring revenue in March to $10 million in ARR in August, and now all the way up to $18 million. Now, there's another really interesting part of this story where the company is working to break from its Chinese origins, including replacing a board member from Sequoia China with a new board member from Conviction Partners who led this round. But for me as a user of the product, I'm just glad to see they're getting the resources to keep building. Speaking of startups we use here at the AI Breakdown, 11 Labs, the voice synthesis company, has announced a new grants program. They write, "We're helping early-stage startups and solopreneurs use voice AI to get innovative projects off the ground. Recipients get 11 million characters a month for 3 months to develop, test, and scale their products. For those who don't have the instant translation in their heads, 11,000 characters is around 200 hours of generated audio. To qualify, they have to have a monetized product use case. It can't be a short-term or one-off project. It has to be a startup or small company only, i.e. have no more than 25 full-time employees, and each company can only file one application." Overall, there's definitely a sense of momentum, and startup momentum specifically in the AI space, with a lot of excitement around image generation and, of course, video generation. We talked about how Pika Labs had raised $35 million and launched their new Pika 1.0, which some have even gone so far as to call AI video's ChatGPT moment. Will things actually play out that way? That, I think, will be a question for 2024. And speaking of battles in 2024, the regulatory battles around AI do nothing but increase in significance. The Senate is getting ready for its next AI forum, which this time will focus on IP and copyright issues. And over in the EU, there are fierce debates right now going on around how foundation and frontier models should be treated in the EU AI Act. Now, this is deserving of an entire show in and of itself. And if you've been on AI Twitter at all, you've probably seen some caustic words around it. But suffice it to say that this will be a central battleground around AI policy in the short term. And it feels like even though we are rounding the corner on the end of the year, this industry is just not slowing down. Indeed, Ahmad from Stability AI tweeted earlier this week, "So many orgs have new AI-related announcements and releases lined up for the next few weeks. Some super amazing stuff coming out. Have we ever seen a pace of cumulative innovation for actually useful stuff this fast? Can barely keep up." That is very true, but I'm glad you're trying to do so here with the AI Breakdown. Thanks for hanging out, and next up, the main AI Breakdown.